I'm really thrilled to be able to share with you some information about, about a man and a place. And this has been very much sort of the work of my husband and myself since 1997. But it's really about Emile Brunel and his legacy and his vision and his role as a member of this community. So soyez les bienvenus means welcome everyone. And that was Brunel's motto. And everyone was welcome to his land, to this place. Native Americans, Europeans, American celebrities, people of national and international significance, including those in distress, fleeing persecution, returned to the hamlet of Boiceville over and over again because of this one man. Emile Brunel really put Boiceville on the map. His hotel, his sculpture garden was the gateway to the Catskills and a peaceful crossroads at the intersection of Native American, European, and American cultures. Oops, sorry, pardon me. Okay, so I am now going to advance my slides, which are not advancing. Okay, this is embarrassing. So Emile Brunel, came to this area in the 1920s. I'll go a little bit backstory, but it was really, he was looking for real estate, and he was a real estate agent. And in fact, we were looking for real estate too, and in much the same way, but many, many, many years later, actually. Okay, this is, where am I? All right, sorry about this. This is embarrassing. Okay, let me just, sorry. I'm doing this on two different computers and they're not cooperating. Okay, let me do this. Okay, and go there and go down. Okay. All right. Oh, this is, okay. Okay, doke. All right, I'm going to do one quick thing. I apologize profusely. This is not how it was supposed to be. Hang in there with me. Okay. All right. All righty. That's pages. All righty. So in 1995, my husband and I decided to look for a house to purchase in the area. And Brunel did this very same thing, but as I said, about 75 years earlier. We were looking for something quaint and historic, not too far from the city, or at least, fairly easy to get to. With great views, of course. Maybe near water, or perhaps even with a swimming pool. So one day, driving back and forth along Route 28, we spied a sign, a for sale sign, buried in the poison ivy in front of this house. My husband and I initially were very intrigued and then fell in love with it the very same day. So we called the real estate agent and she asked us one very simple question. What did we think about the sculptures in the backyard? To be completely honest, we had not gone up there to look. When we did, we fell in love with them, of course. And even if we hadn't, most weigh over 9 tons and are sunk 10 feet into the ground. So what's not to love? So on December 17th, 1997, we closed on the house and immediately drove up to Socrates to buy a chair. This chair. We've bought many, many chairs over the years. And one we inherited. Some we didn't even really want to buy. And even Gladys Brunel, Brunel's daughter, was into chairs, as it turned out. But what made this chair so special is that we picked up this magazine at the antique store at the same time. It was written by Lee Isaacs, and it was all about our house. Who knew? Certainly not us anyway. You may have seen this article or come across it. It's on our website now. But reading it, we learned more than we ever knew before about the history of our place and the man who built it, including a few passages about how the new owners supposedly had no intention of having a family of concrete Indians for lawn ornaments, and were going to break up the sculptures and haul them to the dump. Who on earth was Lee Isaacs talking about? It couldn't be us, right? We later understood after meeting Richard Monterio, the previous owner, that this was all part of a ruse to find another organization who would offer to take the sculptures and put them somewhere safe, probably at his own home. And I feel that some of the work we've been doing sort of to bring Brunel Sculpture Garden and Brunel Park to the sort of community public consciousness is all about sort of writing that, is sort of making up for that story, that intention that we had, which we did not have, of actually taking these down, because we would never have thought of doing that. So we didn't really know much about Emile Brunel, even though we occupied the house and hoped in some way we were fulfilling his unfulfilled dreams for the place. And so our real journey began. Emile was the second child of Natalie and Pierre Brunel, born October 12, 1874. He had 4 siblings, Victor, Antoine, Henri, and Félicité. And we know that because Marie, Félicité's granddaughter, has been in touch with us. Another gentleman named Craig Waddell sent us this. This is Emile's draft registration card, where he states his birthday as December 16th, 1876, which is 2 years later than we thought. So this is one of a number of inconsistencies and mysteries we were to uncover during our journey. Emile began traveling to the desert southwest of the US in the early 1900s, where he painted and began to photograph members of the Native American tribal nations with whom he lived and traveled. He met his future wife, Gladys MacLeod, when she was working as a caricaturist with a circus out west. She was born in 1893. She was nearly 20 years his junior at the time. She was actually 14 years old. He vowed to make his fortune and return to wed her. This is also very romantic. He is also said to have deserted that army in 1914. We saw his draft card, and was therefore unable, due to reasons of personal security, to return to France to see his family. Many of his family still live in and around their hometown of Châteauneuf, France. Their daughter, Gladys Elise Nathalie Brunel, aka Penny, was born in Washington State on February 1st, 1907. And here she is with some of her friends. This is Emile's photograph of his daughter. She's the first row in the center. Brunel's daughter did not have children of her own, though she had married several times. So her mother and father adopted 2 baby girls. They also named Gladys, who was born January 18th, 1931. And she ran the Indian trading post after her mother's death in 1984. A second daughter, Anne, who is the little blonde girl on the left, was adopted as well, and Anne was born September 5th, 1935. The last time I heard from Anne was in 2017. At the time, she was in hospice with stage 4 emphysema. In a letter, she wrote the following: We bought the 3 acres to the right and east and cut a driveway in from Brunel Drive and a path. Our new property line runs right through the middle of the swimming pool to the creek. That's where the goats had their freedom. Did you know where you added your bathroom? The barn was not too far from there. And to the right, my father had an awesome goldfish pond with a bridge. And that is Anne with her grandpa there. The family lived for many years on Spencer Avenue in Riverdale in the Bronx. And we think that their Boiceville home was their seasonal summer residence for a long time. And that is based on the fact that there was no furnace in the house until Anne's husband, Bob, had one put in. They had many exciting adventures about which we don't have a whole heck of a lot of information, except these very interesting slides. We know that I think Brunel was on a car rally through the Sahara at one point. In 1910, Emile founded the E. Brunel School of Photography, which exists to this day and is known as the New York Institute of Photography. Here is the catalog advertising why people should become students of this college. This is a very strange lesson plan from the catalog. I believe this is how to photograph models. I'm not really sure. Stomach exercises, pivots, bathing suit wear, waist exercises, walk in rhythm, dress modeling, pirouette, shoulder exercises. I don't know if this is for the models or for the photographers, but this was part of the course catalog that we found. One of his students was the mother of Betty Davis, who used her daughter as a model for her course, for her studies. But Emile also photographed this charming model himself. I guess he just couldn't resist. Who could? It's Betty Davis. Brunel operated about 35 photographic and portrait studios all over New York from the 20s to the 30s. He also worked as a New York Times Magazine photographer under owner Edward Oakes. I want you to look at these prices. He was not cheap. $25 a dozen, 6 for $5. These are big prices back in that day. He perfected the 1-hour film development process, an invention that unfortunately never took off during his lifetime, but it is why we get one-stop photos at any pharmacy and why filmmakers can view their rushes the same day. He invented this. He took lots of photographs of lots of people and even offered a service for copying and reprinting old photos. He had a very racially and gender diverse staff, which was way ahead of the time and very much in keeping with his philosophy of soyez les bienvenus, everyone is welcome. He had a wide and varied clientele. I'm sorry, this is a little blurry. These are basically vaudeville players. But some of the folks he photographed were quite well known. Does anyone have any idea who these people are? If you do, you can put it in the chat, which I actually can't access because I'm in full screen mode. I'm going to give you a pause for a couple of seconds. Then I'm going to tell you, this photo was taken by Emile Brunel on the occasion of the wedding of Walt Disney to his wife Lillian in 1925. How about this gal? Thinking. Put your ideas in the chat. We'll look at them later. We believe this is Joan Crawford. She has that Joan Crawford sort of attitude, don't you think? Or how about this little fella? I think I just gave you a hint. This is Roosevelt's dog, Fala. This is a rare photo of the Indian spiritual leader, Meher Baba, taken by Brunel and used as Baba as his passport photo. Emile also did a lot of caricatures and sketches of the people that he knew. Then in 1916, in collaboration with the yet-to-be-known Cecil B. DeMille, he produced a seldom-seen silent feature entitled The Hand of God. This may provide a hint as to why this film was never a box office hit. My husband and I visited the film archives at MoCA to see the film. It was a mystery even to the archivist who was unaware they even had it. This description is pretty accurate. A comedy, uncut, unassembled, modern scenes, a man with his family at breakfast, with his secretary at the stock exchange, in a barber shop. And then there's the same characters appear in ancient times, where the man is an Egyptian ruler, episodes of Moses and his people. He carries the tablets of law. He chastises his people for worshiping the golden calf, performs a miracle of manna to the desert. Then there's a sequence of primitive man. All characters occasionally appear in the same sequences in both films. Then appears a modern baby, in skyscrapers. It's sort of surreal before surrealism in filmmaking was even invented. Either that or it was just really kind of an amateur work, but perhaps it was a masterpiece. We don't know. Here are some stills. There were a lot of fake beards, as I recall from seeing the film. Yes, there's a fake beard. And I believe Emile Brunel was in this film as well. It's still at MoMA in the archives if you're curious. Could be fun. So then in 1921, he purchased the Johns Hotel and 76 acres in the town of Olive that consisted of lot number 1 of the terrain hook allotment east of the Esopus in the Hardenberg patent. and which included the land now occupied by the Antioch Central School District facilities. He paid $100. The bottom image is a sketch of the hotel and the buildings and the grounds. And you see on the far right, that is a movie screen. There was also a polo pony ground and tennis courts. He then proceeded to construct the first in-ground Olympic-sized stream-fed swimming pool in the Catskills, and possibly the only in-ground Olympic-sized stream-fed swimming pool in the Catskills. We haven't heard of another one. Many, many famous people visited Emile at Le Chalet. We have documentation about some of these folks, but not all of them. And we just, we're just taking his word for it, basically. I believe this was put together by his daughter. So here's his photograph. I'm thinking this is Lillian Gish. This is his photograph. This I took off the web, perhaps. As we said, he knew FDR and Eleanor, and it seems that FDR enjoyed eating trout as much as Emile enjoyed catching the trout. But even more importantly, Eleanor Roosevelt, you have to read the inscription she appended by hand to this letter that her husband wrote about letting him see the photographs. I have by now learned to care little or nothing for what other people may think. Holy cow, we have no idea what the source of that was or what encouraged you to write that, but that's one of our favorite things in the whole world about these archives. So we started doing more research and began collecting books and articles by people who mentioned spending time at Le Chalet Indienne. So this is Harold Prince, Broadway producer, who says he went as a young man to the old French resort called Chalet Indienne. Everyone spoke French, and the kids, no matter young, drank a little red wine at every meal. And then he went to Catholic service there as well. So we've just been finding some really interesting resources that sort of support the documents we have about who actually visited Le Chalet Indienne. This is Jimmy and Max Ernst. Jimmy spends summer vacations at Chalet Indienne in Boiceville in the Catskill, where he paints his second mural, La Deuxième Création de la Monde. And here he was helping his parents escape from France before the Nazis came. We hit the jackpot when the Frederick Kiesler Foundation wrote to us after we sent them this photo. As it turns out, the architect Frederick Kiesler and his wife Steffi visited Le Chalet Indienne in Boiceville every summer from 1933 through August 1942. And the Kieslers brought even more luminaries with them to stay at Le Chalet. Many thanks and much gratitude to Jill Meissner for her help with this. From Steffi's date book, we found that their guests included Jay Leda, a filmmaker, he's on the left, who worked with Sergei Eisenstein and made films in the Soviet Union. Karl Rathaus, an outstanding German, Jewish, Austrian film composer and professor at Queens College. Kiesler taught at Columbia. A lot of their friends were university professors, which made us think that a stay at Le Chalet Indienne was affordable on a professor's salary. On the left, we have the actress Elisabeth Bergner and her Hungarian-born filmmaker husband, Paul Ginner, and Elisa Landi, an Italian-born Austrian-American actress and novelist who was popular as a performer in Hollywood films of the 20s and 30s. Joseph Binder, who was the artist and graphic designer for the famous New York World's Fair poster, was one of their friends and a regular visitor as well. And we have more people. Sidney and Harriet Janis, they have their own wing at MoMA. They were gallerists. They were very famous for supporting young artists in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Walter Biermann, a designer of furniture. Marion Fenn Greenwood was a muralist, and her husband Charles. Charmian von Wegelen, a distill painter. Ashley Montague, an anthropologist. And Gela Schmitz, who was Mrs. Alexandra Archipenko, were also friends that they brought to Le Chalet Indienne in the tiny hamlet of Boiceville. So Le Chalet was a place where Kiesler got a lot of work done between swimming and sunbathing. I love this shot. They're filling up the swimming pool for the first time, and he's like standing there waiting for the water to rise. I love that. He's like a man after my own heart. Kiesler penned his co-realism manuscript while in Boiceville, which was his most important theoretical text on architecture and his theory of co-realism. He published an article about it in Architectural Record in September of 1939 from, wait for it, Boiceville, New York. He did a lot of writing while in residence at Le Chalet, and he was very tied into the Dadaists, including Marcel Duchamp, Hans Arp, and André Breton, and to Catherine Dreyer, who we see on the upper right. She was most influenced by modern art, particularly by her friend Marcel Duchamp, and due to her frustration with the poor reception that his works received, she became a supporter of other artists. She was co-founder of the Society of Independent Artists and the Société Anonyme, which had the first permanent collection of modern art representing 175 artists and more than 800 works of art. And on top of that, she was a suffragette. In 1931, Kiesler beat out Frank Lloyd Wright with his design for the new Woodstock Playhouse. He named it the Universal. As anti-Semitic as Woodstock was at the time, and even though he won the competition, there was no way they were going to award the commission to a Jewish architect. Instead, Robert Elwin, a descendant of one of Woodstock's oldest families, turned to his uncle Arthur Wolven in the spring of 1938 to construct a theater based on the design of architect Albert Millikan. But Le Chalet was a great place to hang out with friends. And these buildings are not there anymore. And we have a hard time sort of placing them based on the fact that there's trees and forests everywhere. And where they were sort of located, we think is around Upper Boiceville Road and Brunel Drive. But we really have no way of knowing exactly where they were situated. Also a great place to get in to play a game of tennis or a little polo pony, or just enjoy the spectacular views. So the heyday of Le Chalet ended in the mid-1950s when Gladys shuttered the hotel after her mom died. And we've been told that the local fire department burned it down in the 60s as a training exercise for recruits. Not much remains today, and our property line runs right through the middle of the pool in the deep end, just as Anne said it did. So the chalet was doing so well in 1929, Brunel sent his daughter to the city to run his photo studios and began to indulge his passion and talent for sculpting. Brunel built a total of 14 concrete sculptures and totem poles between 1929 and 1941, all of which I'm happy to report are still standing to this day. Though not necessarily in the same place where he sculpted them. In 1947, when Route 28 was widened and straightened to become a limited access arterial off of I-87, 3 of the larger statues were relocated from somewhere in Bearsville to Boiceville. Maybe someone out there remembers that. I don't know. That must have been quite the spectacle. The statue here is named La Statue de la Territoire and was completed in 1929. It's also called the Brunel totem. Years later, the totem on the right of the driveway, you see it behind the ladder there, was moved to what is now our herb garden. When we arrived in 1997, it was lying on the ground and sinking into the mud. We resurrected it with the help of Jin Senekal, Sash Ivanov, and a septic tank loader. This eagle totem, completed in 1941, is still in front of the cabin, but it's a cabin that was built by Howard Quick in the 1960s to replace the original one. This is another shot of the original cabin. This bird, and there's many of them, is a cigogne. This is the fabled stork who brings newborn babies in their beak and drops them down into chimneys, which was famous in Chateauneuf, in sort of the legend and the myth from Emile's hometown. So the mountains really served as a backdrop for the sculptures like this one, the Great White Spirit, completed in 1937. The top of it bears the faces of 4 key religious figures, Buddha, Muhammad, Jesus, and Moses. And they appear to grow out of their base vices. We think they are Pharaoh under Moses, Satan under Jesus, Bacchus under Muhammad, and Devadatta under Buddha. These postcards were another way that Brunel drew people to Boiceville. They were advertisements for the hotel, but also for the town. I mean, he sold us on them when we found these. We're proof it worked. We've been told that the sculpture of the head of this Indian chief was the inspiration for the Onteora High School Indian head mascot. Or perhaps it was Moonhaw. You know, it's interesting, his designs match the final product quite closely. Moonhaw was completed in 1939 and is praying for rain. This is the Indian squaw Natachi, completed in 1935, and she carries her papoose on her back and a bunch of friends in her arms, and she's praying to the setting sun. Oops, sorry, it went a little bit too far. Okay, and where's that one? Okay. Oh, and you know, there's decidedly an air of whimsy about them, I think. And this is a totem pole in ceramic that Marie Lavoie, Felicité's granddaughter, sent us a picture of. I wish we had that. This is the Indian chief. That is a barbecue, and you barbecue and the smoke comes up out of the top of his head. So Emile Brunel was 5 foot 4 inches tall. I think it's important to know that. The sculptures, as I said, weigh 9 or 10 tons. This one is 40 feet tall. It goes at least 10 feet into the ground, and it was built by creating a metal armature and then filling it with rocks, trunks of cedar trees, boulders, you name it, and then wrapping the concrete around it and doing all of these additions, you know, while the concrete was still wet. So it was quite a feat to be able to accomplish this and to create and mold these amazing figures so far high up in the air. We are very fortunate to have interested a concrete restorer and a conservationist in providing us with some pro bono assistance in assessing the conditions of the sculptures so we can better understand what it will take to restore them, because that is absolutely one of our goals. So having scaffolding like this, for example, would be extremely helpful. They were all patented. You know, these are all registered with the Library of Congress. So if anyone wants to copy them, you have to let us know first to get permission. So this was the first house Brunel built on his land. And this was the second, and it's completed in 1933. And you can follow the progress of construction if you go sort of clockwise around the images. He loved concrete. We believe he was the legitimate or illegitimate great-grandnephew of Isambard Kingdom Brunel, who was a major architect and engineer in England, who invented reinforced concrete and built the Thames River Bridge, which is why we have a concrete stucco house basically in the middle of a forest. And of course, there are bas-reliefs on the front of the house as well. On the right is the rondel of Emile and his wife Gladys. The motto of the house is Le Don de Dieu, which is gift of God. And this is what we believe is a feast after a successful hunt, and the village is feasting and celebrating together. So Brunel's daughter, Gladys, ran the Indian Trading Post until her death in 1984, and her daughter ran it until she passed in 1995. And then Anne, the remaining granddaughter, sold off the house and the contents, we believe sometime around 1995. I don't know if anyone attended this auction. Let me know if you did. Let me know if there's something sitting in your basement that you'd like to get rid of, because we're interested. So we arrived on the scene in 1997. Shortly after the Lee Isaacs article, we found this wiki site that someone had started, someone else, maybe a family member, we don't know. So based on all of this wonderful historic, just history and importance, we decided we needed to get the house and the property listed on the National Register of Historic Places ASAP. And in 1999, we did. And our official designation by the New York State Historic Preservation Office is as a roadside attraction. So that really marked the beginning of what was to become the Friends of Brunel Park. Here is our wonderful plaque. By the way, if you get historic designation, you have to pay for this, and you have to pay for every single letter. Emile Brunel Studio and Sculpture Park has been placed on the National Register of Historic Places by the Department of the Interior, 1933. Now, we went for the designation initially to protect ourselves from our neighbors. DOT, DEP, and DEC. This is the recent culvert reconstruction that you may have noticed. This is where our wonderful marker is, and that was the rest of our driveway. It's all good. You may have noticed that construction. It's over, thank goodness. You've seen it, but probably not from this particular vantage point. That was the old culvert. That's the new one. It's done. We have a beautiful new culvert. Things won't flood anymore, and we have a much safer intersection at Route 28 and De Silva Road. It's easier to see the house, so please do come visit. In 2018, we founded the Friends of Brunel Park as a 501c3 nonprofit. Our mission is to grow the Brunel Sculpture Garden's structural ethos by weaving together its indigenous roots, its history as the inspiration for Emile Brunel's artistic vision, and its future as a community learning center and nature sanctuary. And our website is brunelpark.org. In August 2019, we had our inaugural event featuring Spirit of Thunderheart, a Native American Music Award-winning all-women's drumming group. I met Donna and Debbie on a very cold, wet February day in 2017. They knocked on my door and they told us they'd love to drum among the statues. And I was absolutely thrilled. So at that event, Sparrow and Sherritt Chase graced us with their presence, and photographer and filmmaker Brian Paccioni shot a video for the event as well. Oh, I should mention that Alf Evers also knew Emile Brunel and evidently gave him a rose bush at one point in time. So we had occasionally come across articles like this one from 2003. But we started getting some really good coverage by the local press. This is a little hard to read. This is the advertisement for our August 2019 event, and a piece beautifully photographed by Dion August, remains of a roadside attraction. We opened our garden to visitors in May of this year for socially distanced self-guided tours. Heartfelt thanks to Ulster County Tourism and Rick Remschneider for printing this brochure for us and putting 6,000 copies of this in all of the Thruway Catskill Gateway rest areas. And this has made it possible for us to welcome visitors safely. And we were sort of, a guide to sculpture in the Hudson Valley, a sculpture garden guide during the pandemic. And in October, we were named an official I Love New York Path Through History attraction, which is very exciting. We participate in Lark in the Park. We participate in the Shandaken Day art tour as well. And we've been attracting even more people than ever to see the art, walk the land, and feel the spirit. Like Girl Scout Troop 60059, who visited the garden this past Sunday, and this was the first time the troop was actually together physically in about 6 months. And we have 4 acres, and they were able to spread out and run around and enjoy being together. This was our most recent event, and this was done by our artist in residence, Brian Paccioni. This was around Halloween weekend, and it was really a tribute to a young man who had been killed in a car accident right in front of the cabin, right across the street. And there was a cross, a memorial cross that he discovered. And so he created this sculpture exhibition called Jordan's Cross in tribute to this young man. And these are some of his carvings that we had installed around the garden. And one evening, Brian hosted a screening of his music video, Endless, which he shot for the Pine Grove Band, and he showed his documentary, David as in Kingdom, much like Brunel showed films at Le Chalet Indian back in the day. We look very forward to offering more programs to the public when the weather's nicer and it's safer to do so. So I'm just going to conclude. Brunel's legacy lives on in the hearts and minds of those of us who are grateful to him for his works and his vision and his passion. We promise that he will never be underexposed or overlooked again. And I want to read something that I believe was written. I don't know who it was written by. It might have been one of his daughters, but I'm not sure. This sanctuary of Indian statues dedicated to America's original inhabitants was conceived and executed by Emile Brunel, an artist sculptor who loved the Indians and their lore. The statues were created after extensive study of the Indians before and after the white man came to this country. Mr. Brunel has made many sketches during his travels through this vast country, particularly of Indians, and when he settled in Boiceville, he dedicated his monuments to the grandeurs and mystery of nature, and as a token of his admiration for the Indians. The Great White Spirit, or Kitichi Manitou, represents the four religions and the four vices. Emile Brunel's ashes were placed in an urn at the top of this graceful monument that stands 40 feet high and overlooks his Indian statues and the beautiful country that he loved and so proudly adopted. His studio, built among his statues, had many fine artifacts and attracted visitors from many parts of the world. Here, they became more aware of the splendors of the American Indian. This was Brunel's satisfaction, their awareness. Thank you. We invite you all to share with us in the chat any information you have about Emile Brunel, his life, his family, to correct any misinformation you may have heard this evening. We're still learning more about Brunel, and we hope you will help us by sharing any knowledge you have about him and Brunel Park with us. Thanks so much to the Olive Free Library and the Town of Olive Historical Society for letting me share this evening with you.